Well, good morning. Thank you for that, Brian. I appreciate it. So good to see y'all this morning. I'm so glad that we're all here. I'm thankful every Sunday that we get every Lord's Day that we get to do this, but I'm especially thankful this morning. And I don't know why. I just am. And so I just want to let you know that. I appreciate you, and you mean a lot to me. If you would keep Kelly in your prayers, she's been battling some debilitating headaches over the last couple of weeks, and she's dealing with one right now. And if you would, just keep her in your prayers. This morning's sermon is going to be based around what Brian just read for us. That Jesus gives to us his peace. And I want to talk about what that means, and more importantly, I want to talk about what it entails. Back in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus tells us that we're to be lights. This picture is 11 years old, and it really kind of captures that whole thing about being lights, being a city set on a hill. I took this picture with an iPhone 5, you can tell. In 2014, we had gone to camp, and we were home from camp, and there was a singing at the Tipton's house down in Vestavia afterward, and many of you are probably in this picture. I know that my daughter and my son-in-law are. I think there's a few others that are probably in this picture too. This is always something that we would do after camp back then, and our theme that week at camp had been about being lights in the world. And so I thought, every now and then I have a good idea, and this I thought was one. And I got everyone just to hold up their cell phone with their flashlight on, and got this picture of lights on a hill, and it showed up yesterday on my phone in my saved memories from years ago, and I thought, that says something. That says something about being lights, the power of the imagery, about seeing these teenagers gather together, singing songs and hymns to God, and all the adults down the hill just hoping that over the last few weeks the teaching that we had poured into them would stick and it would bring about hope and peace in their own lives. And I felt like we captured a moment there. And this picture gave me hope then, and it gives me hope now. And it also gives me peace. And know that if only for a moment, in this picture, we rose above the noise and we did the best that we could, and there was peace in that moment indeed. Peace is such a simple word to say, but it's deeply complex to attain. It's something I think most of the world will say that they want, but in reality, they show very little by their lives that they do actually want it. It's a beautiful word. It sounds wonderful, but it doesn't sound very real to me sometimes. The world is a dark place, and we're needed to be lights. Peace means calm in the midst of conflict. So how do we attain that? How do we go about acquiring peace? Well, certainly by shining a light on a hill is one way. But we live in a world that seems to thrive on conflict. We know that there's money to be made from war, and so nations wage war. And no, I don't understand all the nuance and the politics of war. I do understand the desire for money. But outside of that, what do we gain from conflict? Why does the world thrive so much on conflict? You don't have to scroll through your social media very far to see video after video of conflicts and how it's almost become entertainment to see two people arguing in a fast food restaurant or to see two people fighting in a school hallway. How did we get here? Because what do we gain from it? Because if you're like me, you can't really think of an answer either, can you? I can't think of a single thing that we gain from glorifying conflict. Yet we live in a society where it's not only acceptable to bully others and to cause conflict, but it's celebrated. To create conflict for no real reason other than because others want to see it. We see it all the time. Again, cell phone video after cell phone video of arguments and fights and worse. And the entertainment industry is leading the charge in cashing in on conflict. A well-known rap artist just won 5 Grammys for simply putting down another man. The highest industry acclamation one can get recognized him 5 times by essentially saying, you're the best at putting someone down. You're the most creative at tearing another man's life apart. We're going to reward you for it. And more than that, we're going to let you tell the whole world at the most watched sporting event in America how much better you are than this other man. And the crowd goes wild. This is the world we live in. We say we want peace, but only in our own lives. We don't mind if someone else is caught in the whirlwind. As a matter of fact, we'll market on it and we'll call it entertainment. Christians, we have to resist. We have to resist. I get it. I get the urge of letting the world pull us into the excitement of celebrating the fall of one person or another, but eventually this creeps in to the church. And we were called higher. We were called to be lights. We're called to be peacemakers, and this morning I want to talk about that. I want to talk about the messy work of being a peacemaker. Because it's not the same thing as a peacekeeper. In fact, we're not called to be peacekeepers. We're called to be peacemakers. And it's a dirty business. But it's one that we were called to. Because when you really zero in on what it means and what it would look like, it's beautiful. Peace is beautiful. Making peace, however, is not so much. You see, the idea at its most basic level is everyone just being nice to one another. But aside from that never really being a reality, peace is costly. To find calm in the midst of conflict can be terribly messy because it requires elders of a congregation to truly shepherd the flock in teaching and correcting and sometimes involving discipline. To keep a congregation healthy, it requires preachers to be willing to preach the whole counsel of God, including the hard things that fly in the face of modern society. And it requires then a congregation with its heart set on heaven by submitting to the leadership that's governed by God himself to carry out whatever solution is necessary, even if it means withdrawal from a wayward brother or sister in hopes to bring them back home. A couple of weeks ago, I shared a lesson about resolving conflicts, and so this would essentially be part 2 of that. In the previous lesson, we discussed how to resolve conflict per the Bible's instructions. And so this lesson would be why. If the other lesson was how, this is why. Why the resolution of issues among the world and each other must be a priority in our walk with Christ. To be a light means that I'm willing to do the work to make peace. In John's Gospel, in verse 5 of chapter 1, it says, the light shone, and the darkness did not overcome it. That doesn't happen by accident. To properly define that, we need to first understand a few things that peace is not to fully shape this idea. And the first thing I'll suggest to you is that peace is not division. Peace is not division. In 1 Corinthians chapter 1, Paul says this, now I exhort you, brothers, by the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, that you all agree, and there be no divisions among you, but that you be made complete in the same mind and in the same judgment. For I have been informed concerning you, my brothers, by Chloe's people, that there are quarrels among you. Now I mean this, that each one of you is saying, I am of Paul, and I am of Apollos, and I of Cephas, and I of Christ. Has Christ been divided? Was Paul crucified for you? Or were you baptized in the name of Paul? I thank God that I baptized none of you except Crispus and Gaius, so that no one would say that you were baptized in my name. Meaning that it's not dividing of the members over differences of opinion. This is way too common within the Lord's church. This is way too common. Someone leaves because their feelings get hurt. And rather than going to make peace and resolve the conflict, they just leave. In the old days, they would just go start another congregation. That's not making peace. As far as I can tell, God is never pleased with division in the body of Christ. Because when division is present, it means that sin also is present. And Paul warned the Roman Christians to avoid those who would cause division. He said, "Now I urge you, brothers, to keep your eye on those who cause dissensions and stumblings contrary to the teaching which you learned, and to turn away from them. For such men are slaves, not of our Lord Christ, but of their own stomach, by their own smooth, flattering speech, that they deserve the hearts of the unsuspecting. For the report of your obedience has reached to all. Therefore, I am rejoicing over you, but I want you to be wise in what is good and innocent in what is evil." It's easy to just leave. Rather than deal with the mess and work through the issues and make peace, it's just easier to walk away. But God said, "Let there be no divisions among us," and to avoid people who want it. Facing the issue with the Bible's instruction must be the first move that we make in order to make peace. It's not avoidance. It's not avoiding the problem or running away from the problem or ignoring the problem. And that's the second point. Peace is not keeping silent. Sometimes we think that if we just keep quiet, about an issue, that it'll solve itself. But rarely, if ever, does that happen. You can't just sweep things under the rug. We view this as keeping the peace, but we aren't called, again, to be peacekeepers. We're called to be peacemakers. And so let's be honest. How much peace are you getting? How much peace are you really getting with holding in your feelings or your frustrations or your concerns about something? How well are you sleeping? It's understandable to want to avoid confrontation. I get that. I think anybody here would rather not have a confrontation. But understand this. Confrontation is not sin. Confrontation is not sin. Anger, in and of itself, is not evil. Making right judgments is not bad judgment. Such judgments often are the pathways to making peace. And it's because the truth isn't painless, and honesty is not easy, and facing reality does not come naturally. We want to push away. We want it just to blow over, so we'll be quiet. Therefore, peace is made sometimes by going through confrontation and not sidestepping it. Peacekeeping is the safe choice, but it's not the wise choice. Because Jesus tells us how to deal with conflict. He tells us in Ephesians chapter 2, "For he himself is our peace, who has made us both one, and has broken down his flesh in dividing the wall of hostility and abolishing the law of the commandments expressed in ordinance, that he might create in himself one new man in the place of two, making peace, and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing hostility." I missed a slide in there somewhere. There it is. These are the instructions that he gives us to accomplish that. He says, if your brother sins, go and show him his fault. Between you and him alone. If he listens to you, you've won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every fact may be confirmed. And if he refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be to you as a Gentile and a tax collector. Truly I say to you, whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And again I say to you, that if 2 of you agree on earth about anything that they may ask, it shall be done for them by the Father who's in heaven. For where 2 or 3 have gathered together in my name, I am there in their midst. You can't avoid the confrontation, Jesus says. You have to go to your brother to solve it. And if your brother doesn't listen to you, then bring 2 or 3 with you to confirm everything that's said. And if he doesn't listen to the 3 or the 4 of you, then you take it before the church. And even then, if he doesn't listen, then you divide yourself. Then you separate yourself only in the hopes that you can pull them back in, to make them miss what they have with you. And understand this, I've been through the process of withdrawing from someone. It's not easy for anybody. It's not easy to do, nor is it easy to be done to. Jesus tells us how to deal with conflict. It's a whole lot easier to read that than do it, I can guarantee you. And here's the thing, even preachers struggle with this. Believe me, I have heard more things said about me than to me. By other preachers, in fact. And when you realize that, that tells you how hard it is to go and confront someone, but Jesus says we must. Peace is not silence. This is the model. Keeping silent doesn't make peace, it makes misery. And more than that, again, the passage from Ephesians, it's not the absence of conflict. Peace is not the absence of conflict. Again, for he himself is our peace, Jesus, who made us both one and has broken down the flesh and the dividing wall of hostility by abolishing the law and the commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of two. You see, that's the goal there. Creating unity by creating peace. You have to make it. That whether there just be one man and one man, now there's two. So making peace and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing hostility. That's messy. That is hard work. But notice who does the heavy lifting. He himself is our peace. He who made us both one has broken down the flesh, that he might create in himself one new man in the place of two. Unity. Jesus has done the heavy lifting. We have to do our part. That if there is confrontation, if there is conflict, peace isn't the absence of it. It means we run headlong into it. Because this is the result. One man in the place of two. Reconcile both to God in one body through the cross. Thereby killing hostility. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we hope for? When we say, I want world peace, is it not in fact the thing that we want is no more hostility? No more violence? No more conflict? Dividing doesn't bring it about. Ignoring it doesn't bring it about. Confronting it does. It's finding the calm in the midst of the conflict. Unity comes from making peace out of conflict. Peacemaking is ugliness that leads to beauty. Peacemaking is walking the way of grace. It's difficult. To face reality without flinching, to go through the painful but necessary path of conflict to make peace. Jesus says, blessed are the peacemakers, not blessed are the peacekeepers. Peacemaking takes time. And so, you're going to have to bear with your brother. You're going to have to be long-suffering and patient. So you can't avoid it, but you also can't rush into it. It takes time. And sometimes we need to simply bear with one another. Again, Ephesians 4 verse 2 says, with all humility, bear with our brothers, and then pray sincerely and wait patiently for the right opportunity to move towards peace. Knowing that the outcome is not always in our hands. Romans 12 verse 18 says, if it's possible, live peaceably with all men. And what that means is that sometimes it's not. But you'll never know if you run away from it. You'll only know that if you run to it. And this is why, this is the most important thing. Every child of God is adopted. Every one of us are adopted. All of us once were his enemies. Each of us were deserving of his anger. And yet, all of us who have been baptized into Christ are beneficiaries of his mercy because he sought to make peace with us through Christ, who bore the weight of his anger, God's great righteous action to set things right. He is our peace. Jesus made something by breaking something. He made 2 one by breaking the dividing wall of hostility. Jesus makes something by killing something. He makes peace by killing our hostility. He breaks down the wall and kills hostility by offering his body to be broken and his body to be killed. Peacemaking in that context is ugly before it's beautiful. Because when Jesus is resurrected, that ugly and broken body is beautiful and made whole again. He himself is our peace. This is why peace must be something we are willing to make. Because God was willing to make it with us first. Where would we be if God just walked away from us? Where would we be if he just ignored us? Where would we be if he just kept silent? He sent Jesus headlong into the conflict to make peace. He loved the world, so he gave. He gave us the Christ. He gave us peace. He gave us his son. It was worth it to God, obviously, to make peace with man, the creature who waged war on the Creator. It was worth it to him to make peace. And if it was worth it to him, shouldn't it be worth it to us? Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Do not be afraid. That's how peace comes about. It is a dark world. But much like this picture, I'm looking at some bright lights. Every kid in this picture, some of who are here, is holding up their cell phone to shine its light and make this picture possible. And that light doesn't work if your phone is dead. Everyone in here plugged your phone in last night to charge it, so it would work today. And everyone here, like a cell phone, has apps that do multiple things. Well, you also do multiple things. Everyone here has a gift and a talent. And just like a phone, you can't use those things if you don't plug into the source. A dead cell phone is no good to you. And a dead faith is no good to God. So we plug in multiple times a day to keep our phones active. And when we go to bed at night, when we get in the car, when we're at work sometimes, we're at school, we plug that phone in to keep that charged, to keep those things available to us to be able to use them. Because we know that the flashlight app ain't going to work later when it's dark and I'm fumbling for my keys if it hadn't been plugged in. I need that light to work, so I need to plug in several times a day. So how often are we plugging into the source? Our light can't shine without power, and peace can't be made without Jesus. So get plugged in and be a light. I'm not sure what your situation is this morning. I don't know if you have conflict in your life or not. I know that everybody does on some level at some point in their lives. The point is that we're not to run away from it. We're to run to it. To make peace where there's hostility. Not to simply keep peace and let things go as a status quo. And so if you're here this morning and you're not a Christian, you are at war with God as we speak. But he sought to make peace with you by offering his son as our peace. And you can be baptized into him, into his death, and be raised a new creature, a light. And if you're here and your light has dimmed, plug back in. If there's any way we can help you do that this morning, I pray you let it be known as we stand and sing a song to encourage you.